Good afternoon, everyone. We are dealing with study number 7 in the series of Max Lucado's book, Unshakable Hope. And today we're talking about the fact that God gets us. You know, when I look around me at this human condition that we're facing and the hardship all around us, the nature of life here on earth, I'm not filled with hope. My experience is that it's full of hurting people and sad people and lonely people and broken people, and the world is full of fighting and sorrow. It's not necessarily a happy place. And getting by in this environment it's not easy, and the trouble is all around us. Yet God is sitting on his throne in heaven, surrounded by golden streets and worshipping angels and people, and here we are, and he's watching us from a distance while we struggle on down here. Is that right? Well, let's explore that a little bit. As we discussed yesterday, Christ left his place in this glory and became a servant for us. We read that in Philippians chapter 2, and we'll touch on that a little bit later. But let's look a little bit at what Christ went through to be able to identify with us. First of all, he was born in a stable, in a town far away from his home, and his first couple of days were spent in a manger, which is basically a feeding trough for animals. And then his parents went on the run to try and avoid Herod's revenge. And his life was a very ordinary life. He grew up as a young boy, and he became a carpenter, and he had no electric saw. And let me tell you, that's a big deal. He was tempted in various ways, and we can read about that, and I'll put the verses in the notes so that you can look them up. And when he started his ministry, he was rejected in his hometown, and his family even thought he was crazy. They thought he had gone insane. Even some of his disciples that initially followed him turned their back on him, and they left him. They stopped following him. He experienced disappointment. Remember when he came, he looked over Jerusalem, and he said that he longed to gather them like a hen gathers her chicks, but Jerusalem wasn't willing. It was a disappointment to him. Even some of his own disciples turned away, and at a critical moment when he needed them most, they turned their back on him. He felt sorrow when he said, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death," when he knew he was facing his pending crucifixion. He knew what it was like to be ridiculed when they spat on him and mocked him, when they teased him about his kingship, about his lordship. He was hungry and tired and weary. He felt all these things. The bottom line is that he knows what we're going through, because he's been there, he's done that, and he's got the t-shirt. Read with me from Hebrews chapter 4. We're going to read from verse 14 to 16. "Therefore, since we have a great high priest who has ascended into heaven, Jesus the Son of God, let us hold firmly to the faith we profess. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin. Let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need." This high priest called Jesus is not separated from us in some holy of holy place, not understanding our pain, but he's been there with us. He knows our weaknesses. We also read in John chapter 1, in the first 3 verses, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. You see, he was with God in the beginning, and he is God, the great creator. And yet we read in verse 14 of that same chapter of John 1, the Word, that is Jesus, became flesh and made his dwelling among us. He came down to earth to be with us. And God became man. The question is why? And we see some of the answers in some of the chapters that we've touched on before. Philippians chapter 2, if we look at verse 7 to 8, it says, he made himself nothing, but taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on the cross. And why did he do that? Why did he do that? For us. We see in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 21, God made him who had no sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. Without his sacrifice on the cross for us, without him taking on that burden of sin and becoming, as it were, sin for us, we have no hope of forgiveness, of cleansing, of atonement. It's only through his sacrifice that we can come boldly to the throne, not in our own strength, not in our own righteousness, but in his righteousness. See, he left his home in glory and experienced all of the same human hardships that we complain about, and he did all of this for us. He gets us. He understands us, and he can identify with all of our experiences and pain. So why is this important? It's because of this that we can approach the throne with confidence, knowing he understands. Are you troubled in spirit? He was too. Are you so anxious you could die? He was too. Are you overwhelmed with grief? He was too. And we can read all these scriptures in the notes afterwards. You see, Jesus didn't deserve to feel the shame, but he did. He didn't deserve the humiliation, but he experienced it. And he never sinned, yet he was treated like the worst of sinners. All of this he endured for us. So he understands us, and whatever we're going through, he understands because he's been there. It's very comforting to know that the person we go to for comfort and counseling knows what we're going through and can identify with us. It's very hard to feel willing to open up to someone who doesn't know what we're going through and what we've been through. He's on our side. Isn't it a wonderful thing to know that he's with us and for us always? He promises, I will never leave you nor forsake you. He's the great comforter and counselor. He's the friend that sticks closer than a brother. He's a burden bearer and healer. What a God we serve. This is what he says in Matthew chapter 11, verse 28, very familiar verse. Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy burdened, and I will give you rest. Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy burdened, and I will give you rest. What an invitation. And that's an invitation to us to come now to him. We can have this hope in him that he understands us because he's been there. Let's pray together. Oh Lord, what a comfort it is to us to know that there's nothing that we have faced and will face or can face that is beyond you, that you don't understand. As you've been here, you've suffered more than most of us. You've experienced what it is to be lonely, to be rejected, even by your own friends and family, to be put through pain and suffering and hardship, sorrow. Thank you that we can come to you, our burden bearer, pour all our concerns out to you, knowing, do you understand? This is a great comfort to us. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Jesus. So just some questions to go through as we conclude. Do you tend to view Jesus through his humanity or through his divinity? And how does this affect your relationship with him? That's question number 1. Question number 2, how might it affect you to think more about Jesus' other side, more about the other side of Jesus? And thirdly, when you approach God in prayer, are you confident that you will receive grace, or do you fear God's response? Amen.